Welcome to Theory of Pets. I'm a passionate pet owner with a drive to help others like me uncover the truth about the pet industry and what goes on behind the scenes. Recently, I have known a few people who have lost pets, and unfortunately, each time this happens, I see the pet owner become really overwhelmed. It's obviously something that none of us want to think about, but in the same sense as a lot of humans prepare for their passing, or we prepare for our loved ones passing when we know that that time is coming, it's important to plan for your pet's passing as well. And even though it's a really dark subject that, makes us very sad, planning and preparation in advance makes it less overwhelming. You are able to, be sad and deal with your emotions at the time that it happens instead of trying to figure everything out. What are you going to do? Are you going to bury them? Are you going to cremate them? If you're going to bury or cremate, where are you going to bury them? Where are you going to take them to be cremated? What are you going to put the ashes in, or what are you going to do with the ashes? There are so many things to think about. And then there's also the financial aspect of it. And, that's why a lot of humans plan in advance. They want to make sure that that financial burden isn't left on their loved ones. And you need to be thinking along the same lines for your pet. If you can store or squirrel away a little bit of money now, it won't be so overwhelming, and you won't have to figure out where that money is going to come from when it happens. Typically, we plan for the passing of a loved one, whether they're human or an animal family member, when they're older. And of course, that's a natural thing, but it's also important to think about even when your pets are younger, because you never know when an accident's going to happen. And typically when there's an emergency or an accident that causes the loss of a pet, it's even more overwhelming because you weren't expecting it. When the pet is older or they've been sick for a long time, there's a little bit of a feeling of, I guess, relief, for lack of a better word, because you know that they're not suffering any longer. But when your pet dies unexpectedly, it can be extremely overwhelming. And if you're not prepared for that, it just adds even more stress and anxiety and emotions to an already very taxing situation. Today, I spoke with Rita Levine. She has a really unique and interesting story about basically rescuing a pet cemetery. And this is a pet cemetery that holds a really special place in her heart for a number of reasons. But today I wanted to talk with her a little bit about her story and her efforts to rescue the cemetery, but also the importance of planning ahead. And she talks a little bit about the cemetery and how they help pet owners plan for the passing of a loved one. And so even though you may not be close to where she's located, you may look for a pet cemetery or, a pet crematorium or somebody in your local area that can help you make these plans if you're not able to figure it out on your own. And it definitely depends on where you live. As Rita and I discussed, I live in a very rural area. We have a lot of acres. We are able to bury our pets on our own property, but you're not allowed to do that everywhere. There aren't pet cemeteries or access to pet cemeteries everywhere. So, there's different things to think about when you're trying to make these decisions. And she gives you some tips and tricks on how to find people who can help you make those choices.
Okay, well, since this is focused on the cemetery, I will tell you about that. Although I am a realtor in Ulster County, and I have been for the past 50 years, so it's like 2 lifetimes of a real estate career. And I had at the time, about a 25-year affiliation with this cemetery. And I tell people when they ask me about it, I say it was as if one day I looked up into the heavens and there was a pet cemetery falling out of the sky towards me. That's the only way I can describe it. It was very, it was not something that I had planned for. Prior to 1993, when my pets died, I had them cremated because I did not know of a pet cemetery in the area. And it wasn't until my dog Henry died in 1993, when I had expressed my interest to bury my dog, that a friend of mine introduced me to the pet cemetery. At that point, it was known as Abingdon Hill Pet Cemetery. And the cemetery today, it's about 40 years old, and it was started by a New York City funeral director who had a vision of a country cemetery where his clients who didn't have backyards would be able to bury their beloved pets. So he came up to Montgomery, New York, and acquired the cemetery. And since 1993, I've been burying my pets there. And through the years, I've told many of my friends about this wonderful country pet cemetery. And I would visit it on a regular basis, and, as most people would go to a cemetery. But it was in the winter of 2017, which was an especially cold and snowy winter, and I hadn't been there during that period of time. So in March of 2018 was when I learned that the cemetery had fallen into financial trouble through mismanagement, and it was sold to a developer at public auction for back taxes. And when I found out about it, I just knew that I would be the one that would save it. So I wasn't looking for this as a project, but it happened. And now I'm the owner, and it's become my passion and my labor of love.
Sometimes that's how the best things in life happen. It's not necessarily planned. It just finds you.
It does. It does. And, I tell people, too, that as with any act of bravery or kindness, at that moment, you don't stop to consider the consequences after the fact. You just rush in to help or to save, and that's exactly what I did. I knew it was something very special and worth saving for my pets and the approximate 10,000 other souls that are there. And there are also many human remains that are interred with their pets as well. So it's quite a special place.
Absolutely. And for people that don't know or don't have one in their area, tell us a little bit about pet cemeteries, what they are, and why they're so important to pet owners, especially in urban areas. I think they're more commonly seen.
Well, our pets are our joy, our companions, our pet children. And because of the love we have for them, many of us wish to provide a forever resting place. So the pet cemetery is near and dear to my heart, and I felt it was a commitment that I had made to my pets that are resting there, and also to my pets at home, that eventually I will want them to be with their siblings, and to all the other souls that are there, both human and pet, and to ensure that the cemetery would go on forever. And that was the driving force for me to save that. It's a place for pet owners to honor their deceased pets. So they're very important to have around, and they're scarce. They're very scarce. The cemetery now is called Forever Angels Pet Cemetery, and it serves the community for about 100 miles around, maybe a little bit more.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very wide area, considering that the original owner was a funeral director in New York City. So he had a huge radius of clients, many from New York, many from New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a large area. So the cemetery is so important. It really is. And many times a funeral service and a burial can help provide closure for grieving pet owners when they want to say goodbye. They can either bury or they can cremate. We take care of helping people with transportation. Many pets die at home and people don't know what to do, so
Oh,
we offer
yeah.
to pick them up and bring them to the cemetery, either from their home or from their vet. We have a viewing room so people can spend time with their pets saying goodbye. We give them emotional support. We help them with selecting headstones to memorialize the pets. When I lost my Henry in 1993, the entire experience of burying him was just like that of a human funeral. It gave me peace and closure, and it gave me a forever place to visit. That was really the driving force for wanting to bury him. I wanted him to be in a place where I knew he would be safe forever, not in my backyard, because if I moved, obviously he would still be there.
Right.
And when I had gone to the cemetery originally, I noticed all the heartfelt sentiments on all the stones, and I felt, my gosh, there's more emotion here than in most human cemeteries.
That is so, coming from somebody who has lost many pets over the years, that's so inspiring to me, because I know, like you said, a lot of pet owners don't think about it until the time has come. And, when it does happen, there's things like, what are you going to do with the remains? How are you going to transport them? And the emotional support, it's devastating. Anybody who's lost a pet knows it's as devastating as losing a human member of your family.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what we're here for. We're here to offer that support and to help them get through the process, whatever it is. I mean, many people cremate, and many people bury. So whatever their personal choices, we help them through that and hold their hands through the entire process. And we even contact them after they've buried or cremated, just to see how they're doing, and see if some people just need to talk, and being able to offer that means so much to them.
Absolutely. And speaking of, you help people through the process. And as I just mentioned briefly, a lot of people, this is not something that we want to think about. It's not something that we want to plan for. So people sort of put it off, and you don't really start thinking about it until, unless you have a really old senior pet that's having some health issues, then maybe you start thinking about it. But, it's not something that people plan for. And it's really important that they do, even when the dog is young.
Absolutely.
Or a cat. It could be any
Absolutely.
pet. So what do you help people plan in advance, or what do you recommend for pet owners who want to have a plan in place?
Well, this is something that no pet owner wants to think about. But my philosophy is to plan for the unexpected. The reality is, if you love and you cherish an animal, you want to make sure that you show him as much love in death as you do in life. There are several ways you can do this, which we can discuss, but just as humans, pets get old and they develop illnesses. Not all pets die when they're older. Some pets, unfortunately, die at a very young age. But decisions, involving the end of life and euthanasia are very difficult. It's not an easy decision. And that becomes a personal choice, usually guided by you and your veterinarian. It's tragic and upsetting. It's just like losing a family member, and people feel overwhelmed. So planning in advance is smart. It's a time of great stress, both emotionally and financially. So pre-planning offers that peace of mind. Many people have pets that are already buried, and the pets they have at home, when they pass, they want them to be buried in the same location. So planning helps with that. I know some pet owners in our cemetery have buried at one particular end of the cemetery, and now maybe they have to bury at a different end, and they would like all their pets to be together. So planning in advance and buying multiple plots for pets you have at home is also a smart decision. We have people who do that. We had a burial recently, and the people have many pets at the cemetery, but also planning for the future. They said, my gosh, we need 10 more plots. So they've made that decision to reserve them. And sometimes when you're doing it at the last minute and you're making plans in haste, it may not be what you really want. You may end up cremating instead of burying a pet. Burying a pet gives you the option of having like a funeral service and a viewing and time to say goodbye. So planning ahead is a good idea. And, there are prepayment options too for people who may want to reserve something and pay it off a little bit at a time.
Those are excellent tips. And, it's always something I advise people to do too. Like you mentioned, pets, we would love it if they all lived their fullest, longest life. But unfortunately, things happen and sometimes it's unexpected and the pet is young. And, it's something that you end up having to deal with long before you have expected to.
Absolutely, Samantha. And the better you're prepared for this, the less stressful it is. It's stressful enough just losing a pet, but if you don't have to make all of those decisions. So I tell people, visit a local pet cemetery, speak with the owners, be sure the cemetery is licensed. Learn about cremation. If people don't know about it, they may want to know more about it and learn. Ask what a burial is like, what goes on, what are the options for burial. People may want a viewing. There are pets at home that a lot of people will bring to the cemetery to say goodbye to the pet that has passed, so it's closure for the animal as well. People consider buying headstones and what they want to say on the headstone. Something to consider too is do you have a budget?
And these are all things, when you do visit the pet cemetery, and I'm sure they're not, obviously yours sounds like you guys kind of go above and beyond the typical experience, but I'm sure at most pet cemeteries, there is a caretaker or somebody available to sort of walk you through the process and help you with those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like I had mentioned before, when I buried Henry, it was done just like burying a human, with having a viewing and saying goodbye and placing him in a casket, and then having them put him in a funeral car and bring him up to the site. And I remember it was a very, very hot summer day, and they had put up a tent over the grave, just like they do in human cemeteries, to shade us from the sun. And we were able to read a little poem to say goodbye. So it was very, very meaningful, and it really helped with closure. People can do this with cremations as well, not just with burials.
And we've talked a lot about pets passing and the planning of that. But the flip side of that some people might be thinking about while they're listening to this is what happens if you pass away or something happens to you and you're unable to care for your pet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you spend a lot of time working with people and helping people to plan as well.
Yes, Samantha, that's an incredibly important question. What if you're not around to make the decision? And it's not fair to pets not to plan, and it is an act of love to prepare. Life happens, and not always in predictable ways. We assume we will outlive our pets, but that's not always the case. And many pets, unfortunately, end up in shelters, and many times kill shelters, because the owners have not made provisions for the care of their pets. It's very, very sad. So a smooth transition is so much less stressful on a pet having just lost its owner, Or in many cases, not even a death, but if an owner can no longer care for a pet, they've become incapacitated. So you want to have someone who knows your pet and who is familiar with your pet, and hopefully that your pet likes. You want to write things down and update them as needed, and make sure that the person you've chosen to take over knows where the information is stored.
Oh, that's a good point for sure.
Yes. A lot of times when people come to visit, your pet has an affinity for them, so that helps with choosing a caregiver. Many things you can do too is have your pet microchipped, and you want to keep a journal with your veterinarian information, with any medications your pet is taking, allergies they may have, their traits and habits, their diet, including the type of food they eat, because so many times changing a pet's food can be traumatic and very upsetting to their system. So not only is a pet going through the loss of being removed from their caregiver, their owner, but now their diet has changed as well. So it helps to know what they eat. And also to make it known to family and your veterinarian and your friends who you have designated to take care of your pet, so people are aware of this if something should happen to you. And I tell many people, if you can, leave a trust fund for your pet to help with added costs.
Oh, that's a great tip.
So not only now is somebody assuming the care of your pet, but they also are taking on the added costs of, daily life like food, but also veterinarian costs, which are high.
Yeah.
So leaving a little bit of money if you can. I mean, some people can't, but if you can, that's a wonderful thing to do. And you want to make absolutely sure that the person who's taking your pet loves animals and wants to be the caregiver.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, if you don't take those precautions, sometimes pets get left with people that may not necessarily care for pets and doesn't want, a pet in their home, or they, maybe end up in a shelter, or, like you mentioned, a kill shelter, if the people aren't prepared for what's going to happen when they're no longer able to care for their pet.
Absolutely. Somebody may take your pet, but then in the end they may say, gee, I can't do this anymore, and they give the pet to a shelter or to another person, and then the pet gets bounced around. So it's really important to think about this. Like I said, people don't want to, but it really is important. Just like you would provide possibly for another human member in your family. For many of us, our dogs and our cats and our other pets, they're our pet children.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
So if you're talking to someone and they're asking you questions about this, what tips would you share for pet owners to ensure that their pet is properly cared for in the event that something would happen to them? Do you advise writing down a plan, or just talking to
absolutely, they should keep a journal. There should be a journal with all of the pet's information, who their veterinarian is, what medications they take, what allergies they have, what their traits are, their habits, their diet. And like I said, you want to make it known to all the people around, who you've chosen to take care of your pet. But writing as much down as you possibly can is really the key, so that people know. And usually there's somebody close in your life, a friend or a family member, that you can share this information with. Someone that, like I said, if something happens to you, they know, and they can make sure that whatever your wishes are for your pet, that they're absolutely taken care of.
Absolutely. Do you have any other tips that you want to share, or advice that you want to share for pet owners to prepare for either, something happening to them where they can't care for their pet, or to prepare for their pet's passing?
Well, I'd like to say that pet owners should think about this, and they should take the time to visit a local pet cemetery, either for burial or for cremation. The one thing, like, we offer only private cremation. So many times, pets who pass away and I shouldn't say they're not privately cremated, but their pet is sent out for cremation. In this case, we make sure that the pet comes to our cemetery, and if they are being cremated, it's a private cremation. And pet owners can even watch, if they want, their pet being placed in the cremation chamber, so they know it's only their pet that's going in and only their pet that's coming out. So I would say visit a pet cemetery, ask about burial options, ask about cremation options. If people that are listening to this are somewhat local, I'd say please come and visit Forever Angels Pet Cemetery. We're in Montgomery, New York, which is about an hour and 15 minutes north of Manhattan, so it's not that far. And you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to speak to anyone and discuss anything they'd like to discuss about planning, about burials, about cremations. And they can also look us up on Facebook at Forever Angels Pet Cemetery, and they can follow along and see some of the things we've done. Again, this was a rescue of a cemetery that had been neglected and had been sold at auction, and was rescued from a developer. So we've done an awful lot to refurbish the property. It looks absolutely gorgeous. It's like a park. It's a beautiful place to visit. And I think when people go to a cemetery, they get a feeling of peace. And they also know that it's a place that even after their pet is either cremated or buried, that they can come and visit and spend time and walk around. And they also meet other pet owners there who have gone through the same thing. There is the second Sunday in September is National Pet Memorial Day, and it's celebrated worldwide. And many of the pet cemeteries invite people to come and to be with one another and to bring their pets from home so they can walk around and share stories. It's very nice. We just did our third one in September.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And what a great way for, pet owners who have lost a pet to kind of come together and share with other pet parents who have experienced the same thing.
Yes, and connect. And it doesn't become a sad experience. It becomes a lighter experience by seeing other people and talking about their pets, both the ones who have passed and the ones who are there with them or at home, and share so many stories. It's really wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing today and for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. I think this is a really important topic that isn't talked about enough. And I know it's a hard topic to talk about, whether you're discussing, you being unable to care for your pets or the passing of your pet. It's never something that we want to discuss, but it's something that needs to be addressed. And I think it's something that more pet owners really need to be aware of and think about in advance.
Absolutely, Samantha. Absolutely. And like I said, I'm here. If anyone would like to speak with me, I'm more than happy at any time to speak with them and help them.
I have to give a big thank you to Rita for being on the show today and talking to us. And, as she mentioned for you guys, if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to her, a link to their Facebook page is below the podcast, so you can reach her through that. You can also get on our website, topdogtips.com, and there are some resources there, as well as a contact us page. So you can send me any questions that you might have. Feel free to email me any future topic ideas that you'd like to hear about as well. If you're new to the podcast or you've been here and been listening throughout, I really appreciate that. And I would love to help answer your questions and reach out to people in the pet industry that may be able to help do that. Odds are, if you've got a question, there are hundreds of other pet owners out there asking the same thing. So I want to know what you guys want to hear. Definitely reach out. Again, on our website, topdogtips.com. There's a link right below the podcast. And if you guys are listening on the Google Play Store or iTunes. However you're listening, if you could take just a second to share just a quick review of the podcast, that would be really great. It only takes a second, and it really helps me when I'm reaching out to experts in the industry to show them that you guys are out there, you love the podcast, and you want to hear more. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll be back with another hot topic next time.